Recommended practices for placement agencies. The INA has worked to bring standards to the nanny industry for over 38 years. There are recommended practices for nanny placement agencies. General practices. Respect the work agreements between families and caregivers. The INA recommends that placement agencies not solicit nannies for other positions while they are still employed of a family unless the nanny requests assistance with finding a new position. Respect the proprietary promotions or company-sensitive materials of other placement agencies. The INA recommends that placement agencies independently develop all materials related to the operations of their business. If forms, marketing information, training materials, or other publications are used from other companies, the placement agency must obtain written permission and cite the source of materials on the publication or document. Abide by all pertinent laws and regulations. The INA recommends that placement agencies be knowledgeable about and comply with all applicable laws and regulations affecting placement operations in their jurisdiction, including, but not limited to, licensing agreements, immigration laws, and wages and labor requirement. INA urges placement agency owners to check with their state attorney general, Department of Labor, Secretary of State, IRS, or the regulatory bodies that oversee business licensing in the location where the agency will do business to find out what licensing, if any, is required. Carry professional liability insurance. The INA recommends placement agencies carry professional insurance if obtainable. Relationship with clients. Disclose the process of vetting caregivers. The INA recommends that placement agencies disclose the method they use to recruit, interview, and evaluate caregivers. When personal interviews are not possible, the prospective employer should be advised which interview method was used, by phone or by an agent acting on behalf of the agency. Check caregivers' personal and employment references. The INA recommends that families be provided with information on a caregiver's employment history. At a minimum, 2 references should be checked by phone. The agency should disclose all information about the caregiver verified through personal and employment references as allowed by law. Families should be provided with information and encouraged to check references for themselves. Provide information on the caregiver's job qualifications to the prospective employer. The INA recommends that placement agencies accurately disclose to the prospective employer information obtained through a caregiver's references and background screening. Agencies should also disclose the methodology used to obtain the information, as allowed by law. Prepare a written agreement with each client family. The INA recommends placement agencies develop a written agreement between the placement agency and the prospective employers to facilitate an understanding of the obligation and expectations of both parties. Both the agencies and the prospective employer should keep a copy on file. Included in this agreement should be a full and accurate explanation of the placement agency's fees, refunds, replacement policies, services to be provided by the placement agency. Furthermore, the placement agency will describe the relationship between the client and the caregiver, including the understanding that the client family will follow all employment laws in regards to hiring the caregiver. Make adjustments, refunds promptly. The INA recommends placement agencies make refunds and adjustments quickly and in accordance with the written policies for the placement agency. Timeframes and other conditions regarding replacement or refunds, such as limits on the number of replacement or amount that will be refunded, should also be included in written agreements that is provided to the prospective employer. Relationship with caregivers. Provide a full explanation of requirements to caregivers. The INA recommends that the placement agencies provide a written explanation to caregivers regarding applicable fees and/or agency services to job applicants prior to rendering service. INA recommends that the agency inform caregivers in writing of the agency's obligation to the caregiver prior to or after placement. Such an explanation of service should include fees, if any, to be paid by the applicant. The agency's responsibility to the caregiver in the event of a placement is unsuccessful, and the agency's policy regarding payment for travel costs for interviews or relocation to an accepted job. Be accurate when describing available positions. The INA recommends that placement agencies accurately and truthfully describe job duties, responsibilities, working conditions, hours, salary, and benefits for in-home childcare opportunities. Placement agencies should also present only available positions to caregivers looking for a job. Make family information available to nanny candidates. The INA recommends that placement agencies provide caregivers with descriptive information on prospective families and the positions that they are offering. In addition to detail pertaining to the available position, such information might include the parent's child-rearing philosophies and a profile of the family, including their special interests and specific needs. Family references may also be provided to the nanny candidate. Coach the family and caregiver to develop a work agreement. The INA recommends that placement agencies encourage the employer and caregiver develop a written agreement which accurately describes the condition of employment which has been arranged. At a minimum, INA recommends that a work agreement include job duties, hours and days of duty, wage amount, when and how paid, and compensation for overtime work. Employers legally required tax obligation, additional benefits such as health insurance, holiday and vacation policies, sick leave if offered, frequency of work agreement review, terms of notice of termination and grounds for dismissal. See INA's Nanny Employer Handbook. Respect and regard caregivers as clients. The INA recommends that placement agencies regard caregivers with the same respect as client families by considering each caregiver's preference and qualifications when making referrals to prospective employers. Placement agencies who employ caregivers in the USA. Take on the role of employer. The INA recommends that placement agencies who employ their caregivers follow all required steps to become an employer. Placement agencies should reach out to their local, state, and federal governments to understand what is required. Pay required taxes. The INA recommends that placement agencies who employ their caregivers follow federal law that requires all employers pay a portion of their employees' Social Security taxes, state unemployment taxes, and in some states, workers' compensation. File correct year-end paperwork. The INA recommends placement agencies who employ their caregivers file the proper year-end tax forms and supply their caregivers with a W-2 form by January 31st of each year. Agencies must also file Form W-3 with the Social Security Administration by February 28th of each year. A list of INA members who provide payroll services and legal counsels to employers of nannies and who agree to adhere to INA's commitment to professional excellence and recommended practices can be found at www.nanny.org. Be accurate and truthful about the job. The INA recommends that placement agencies who employ their caregivers accurately and truthfully describe job duties and responsibilities, working conditions, hours, salary, and benefits for in-home childcare employment opportunities.